The world is going through changes happening at a speed that we have never seen before. This is leading to disruption, chaos, panic, fear, hysteria, and a turbulent economy and marketplace. How do you protect your wealth in a turbulent world? How do you invest for cash flow in alternative assets to escape the rat race in times of uncertainty? How do you decentralize yourself, family, your community, your business, and your investments to become sovereign and escape the matrix? If you are looking for strategies, tactics, and techniques to escape the rat race and matrix, you are in the right place. My name is MC Lobsher, and this is Cashflow Ninja.
This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Lobsher. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode and spending your most valuable resource, your time, with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. Podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up for the Wealth Dojo, the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space. You could sign up for this weekly newsletter by going to cashflowninja.com/subscribe. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by Adam Carroll, that he's popularized the shred method. So I'm really excited to jump into that. Adam, great to see you and great to connect.
MC, it's awesome to be with you today, and I can't wait to see where we take this conversation.
Absolutely. Now, Adam, for my listeners, some for my viewers that are not familiar with you, what you, your background and what you get up to these days, could you please share a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you do get up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last 2 decades of my life, MC, I've really made my living as a professional speaker, going out and training groups, clubs, organizations, associations, companies all around the globe around financial literacy. So we have that in common. We're both educators to a certain extent, right?
Yep.
And over the last decade, I would say, I got really intrigued by the amount of debt that people had, both their student loan debt, their mortgage debt, if they were investors, how they were leveraging debt or over leveraging themselves on debt. And I got really intrigued by figuring out strategies on how to minimize one of the greatest expenses that we'll ever have in life, which is the interest expense on debt. And the other great expense we'll have are taxes. And so you and I also, I think, are similar in that we believe in the power of owning businesses and real estate to minimize our tax liability, maximizing cash flow. And I just sort of tagged on to it with the shred method, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. How do you create even more efficiency with that cash flow that you're creating so that you're giving less and less to the bank and creating more and more net worth for yourself?
Yeah, I love the financial literacy part because, boy, do we have a problem globally on that. And I mean, there's a reason why, right?
Yes.
Because if you are financially literate, you can make very different decisions when it comes to taking on debt with such as student loans and how you finance and purchase all of the other different assets. And boy, is this this debt is it's just incredible. If you look at the statistics, which I know when you torture data, it confesses, but regardless who puts them out, the debt,
Yes.
personal, household, corporations, governments, and debt is a weapon that will be used against you in one way, shape, or another, right? Eventually. Yes, you can leverage it, as we mentioned, with real estate, but it could be turned into a weapon that could really take you down because, you know, if you look at from a big picture, you mentioned taxes, you mentioned debt, you're putting yourself in a compound interest equation, which is very unfavorable to begin with.
Right.
And now you're just, again, you're just treading water, like trying to get out of that quicksand, right?
Exactly.
As you're going on your wealth journey.
Exactly. We describe it this way that most people don't have an income problem, they have a liquidity problem. And the challenge with any kind of debt or leverage tool is that the banks are underwriting us based on our income. So they will tell us, you can afford this because we've underwritten and this is the amount of risk we're willing to take on. The challenge for most consumers is, if I can afford this payment and I can afford that payment and I can afford the next payment and the next payment and the next payment, I begin to payment myself into a corner. And if I don't have much left over at the end of the month, regardless if that means I'm going out and spending the discretionary income on wants as opposed to needs, or I'm just blowing it having fun or whatever it may be, if there's not enough to dig yourself out of the hole, you're going to forever be in that hole, as you described, the quicksand. And so one of the things that we've realized is that we can educate people on how to create efficiency with their cash flow so that they have a bigger shovel, so to speak, to get themselves to fill the hole back in that they've created for themselves, essentially.
Yeah, and I think the more debt becomes available, it just gone exponentially up, right? Look at student loans,
Yes.
where it used to be, number one, there wasn't really a market for that debt. And then when it
Right.
started, it was literally just a supplement.
Yes.
And usually those loans were paid off fairly quickly
Yes.
in the years when you finished college, because you would then have the skills that you got in college to go into the workplace, to
Totally.
find employment, to pay it off quickly. That no longer exists at
Yes.
all. And then also from an over leveraging standpoint, you look at the debt that's been available to individuals and families and so forth. It's it's just crazy. I have we have family friends from South Africa that came to the US in the 1980s too. And he always tells me the story that when he came to the United States, it was so wild when when they went to go look and to buy a house. Because like in South Africa at that time too, they're now where the US is too, by the way. But back then, you would put almost 50% down of the
Mm-hmm.
price of a house,
Right.
finance the rest over 5 to 10 years, and pay off that house.
Yes.
And when he came to the States, it was like, wait a second, 5%? How much do I need to put down?
30 years you're paying on this,
30,
right?
like 95% leveraged,
Yeah.
like asset. And he was also working on Wall Street at that time. He goes, who's going to make that deal? I won't even do that deal with other investment banks,
Right.
but you're doing it with the public, right?
Right.
It's crazy.
It is. And I want to go back to a comment you made about particularly student loan debt and how more and more debt is made available. My early days in the speaking business, I was really doing a lot of work on college campuses. And I started digging into how did the student loan system get created, and what was the growth and the explosion of student loan debt over time. And it was considered a huge success. The whole idea of the Department of Ed being able to issue loans to students who wanted to go to school but couldn't afford to, that was a major milestone. I mean, when that was passed and it was funded between around the late 1970s and the early 2000s, 2004, there was $200 billion in student loan debt outstanding in America. And everyone attached to that program said, we did it. This is awesome. We made this available. Students took advantage of it. They're going out and getting degrees. And then between 2004 and 2014, we went from 200 billion in student loans to 1.2 trillion dollars in student loans. So $1 trillion increase in 10 years. Part of that was because of the subprime mortgage crisis and crash. Um, Student loan was easy money to obtain. And so people went out and got it. Well, if you fast forward now, 2014 to 2024, it's slowed down certainly, but we're sitting at 1.7 to 1.8 trillion dollars in student loan debt. And about somewhere between 200 and 300 billion dollars of that is in repayment. So think about this 1.5, let's say, trillion dollars is sitting out there as a weight, right? It's a weighted backpack that people are carrying around every single day, not making payments, not making it lighter. It continues to get heavier and heavier every single day. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that for me, it kept me up at night for a very long time until we started diving into Shred and teaching people how to rid themselves of that, that incredible weight.
That sets it up perfectly. So tell me a little bit more about the Shred method.
Yeah. So believe it or not, this started as and is known as an Australian mortgage. And there was a bank in Australia, probably about, I would say 30 years ago, that got their start. where they would give, if you were an Australian citizen and you obtained a mortgage through this bank called Macquarie Bank, they would give you what they called a sweep account in addition to your mortgage. And so as your money went into that sweep account, you would pay your bills out of the sweep account, and then the sweep account would just get moved over into the mortgage at the end of the month. And so what happened was in Australia for a number of years, probably at least a decade and a half, there were more citizens in Australia that owned their home free and clear than there were that had mortgages on their home. And they tried to install this in the US, and it failed miserably. And I think part of the reason for it, MC, is that as a society, we are taught to walk heel toe by the banking system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to get yourself out of that habit, out of that habitual pattern of behavior of, I have money in my checking account. It makes me feel good to have it sitting there. And so now I'm going to go overspend my income and shoot, now I don't have any money to pay my debt off, right? So with Shred, what we use is the same philosophy as what Macquarie Bank created in terms of a sweep account. We call it a Shred account. And our income cycles through the Shred account, and a piece of software that we've created using a complex algorithm tells you, based on how much you have coming in and how much is going out, how much you owe, how much the interest is, here's how much you're going to send in lump sum payments to these debts to begin knocking them out in record time. And the majority of our users will have all of their debt paid off, mortgage included, somewhere between 4 and 6 years.
Wow. Wow. Is that also with the frequency of payments, or what does the mechanics look like if you lift up this hood? Because, we know how debt's typically structured. I mean, you look at a student loan, it's almost designed to never be paid off.
100%.
And you look at a mortgage front loaded with all those interests, kind of similarly structured, almost it's designed never to be paid off.
Totally. And I will share with you what's under the hood. I won't give away all the secret sauce here, but I'll tell you in a second. The interesting thing about the comparison you just made, student loans, they really are. They're engineered in a way where they will likely never be paid off. And there is sort of this, I don't want to call it a guiding thought or a principle or this misnomer that people have, that, well, someday it'll be forgiven. Someday you'll have spent 3 times the amount that you borrowed in interest if you wait till someday. And so we went after student loans like it was our job. I mean, we knocked them out in less than 2 years, and most people can do it with Shred in even less time. The mortgage itself is an interesting one because the way an amortization table is set up for a mortgage is just as you said, almost all of the interest is front loaded on the first, let's call it 10 or 12 or 15 years. We like to describe it as this. If you set a traffic signal over an amortization table, the first 10 years are red light, the second 10 years are yellow light, the third 10 years are green light. And so because most people will only stay in their home 5 to 7 years, the majority of your payments that you're making in the first 10 years are all interest. So you end up having very little equity. You've sent a lot of money to the bank, and then you move on to the next home and you get an even bigger payment because most people move up, not move down. And so what we're suggesting is, what if we could turn that traffic signal all green light? And instead of, a 30-year payback time, what if it's 3 to 7 years payback time? And even if you only stay in the home 5 years, but when you go to sell it, you get hundreds of thousands of dollars back at the closing table. It makes life significantly easier. So back to the original question about the secret sauce. It is 100% based on the fact that people's discretionary income is largely inefficient. It just sits in checking accounts or savings accounts doing nothing. And then it's also based on the timing of those payments. So how do we make a lump sum payment against the mortgage, timing it so that your income is coming in hours or a day or two, right after. So the interest expense on the borrowed money that we're sending to pay that debt off is minuscule, like negligible in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I love the system because if you do not have a system for cash flows inside your personal, your business, or investment economy, it's just going to leak out. So I love that there's this intentionality, and maybe you can speak to that too, because Um, yeah, it's just like you said, a lot of people don't think about this. They're all excited about the doggy coin that's going to go up 5,000%, or
Yeah,
always try to find that magic bullet or that magical investment outside of themselves. And I
totally.
look at the cash flow optimization and efficiency to what you speak to. And I said,
Yeah,
the amount of money that people could recover and recapture inside of those personal business and investment economies without
totally.
even looking for another investment or
Totally.
doing, or investing in something else.
Yeah.
There's no return on that. I mean, it's just an infinite return that you're going to generate on that, right?
That's exactly right. And to that end, what I get from people a lot is, well, my mortgage is 3%, or I got a 4% mortgage. And so I'm good with that. I can make three times that in the market. The challenge is that I can, and this is the question I generally will come back as an answer to their statement. I will ask them, if you could uncover 20 or 30 or 40 or $50,000 a year in your existing income without increasing your income, without decreasing your lifestyle, if you could create 30 or 40 grand more in 12 months time, 18 months time, would you do it? And usually it's like, absolutely. Why would you do it? Because then I could invest more. And I'm like, exactly. So the whole point of Shred is this doesn't have to be I'm going to go right to the finish line 4 to 7 years down the road and pay everything off. What if I just get to a point where my income is so efficient that I've carved back the 20 or 30 grand that I'm sending to the bank in interest, and I get to leverage that, deploy that through the Shred account into things like, oh, I don't know, like overfunded cash value life insurance policies or IULs
Yep.
that can then be translated into syndications and other alternative investments. I mean, this is truly like I'm subscribing to the dojo as soon as we're done, by the way, MC. So I've not been in the dojo yet, but I know what you talk about is 100% in line with what we do. The Shred is just like an add-on, a stacking strategy to create more cash flow or more liquidity, let's say, to allow you to invest at a higher level.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you plug those cash flow leaks, and there's so many different things that you can do to do that, and then adding this kind of method to the debt, it's just going to put rocket fuel on it. I'm just thinking of, like, once you start to plug the cash flow leaks and you employ this method, to your point, now you can fund that high cash value life insurance, right, and
Yeah.
build that up, which then opens up more opportunities to plug cash flow leaks. One of the things that I've always shared is, once you have this system of intentionality and you optimize your cash flow, and now the money is being swept into the life insurance policy. Well,
Yeah.
because you have this reserve account that's now growing every single week, well, what else happens? You have 6 months of expenses for your personal business and
Yep.
investment economy. So what
Yep.
can you do now? Well, you can raise insurance deductibles. Very,
Totally.
very simple thing to do. Medical
Totally.
insurance, and so forth, because you have this reserve account now.
Yep.
So instead of paying, I mean, this is at the time of recording, this is so crazy to say this out loud. But in certain states, like just with medical insurance, there's some people and entrepreneurs that are paying around $3,500 to
Yeah.
4,000 for medical insurance for their families.
Right.
That's like the gold plan kind of thing, right?
Right.
Where you bring that down to the bronze, which is around about $1,000. Now you've freed
Yep.
up $2,500 to $3,000 a month. And
Totally.
if something happens, you have the reserve account to cover the deductible. So it's
Totally.
not like you're putting your family at risk by just fine tuning and making these little things to be more efficient. You're just now really starting to recapture more of the money in your own
So
economy.
true. So true. And it goes back to the comment that I made about people don't have an income problem, they have a liquidity problem. The reason that we have that we're overpaying in my estimation for insurances is it's like, well, if something goes wrong and I don't have that money, what if you do have the money? Are you betting that something's going to go wrong, or are we betting that things are going to go right and we have the
Right.
ability to cover it? But for the majority of people, if 30 grand a year is going to my banker, my mortgage lender, and I don't have that to put into either the equity of my home, assets like life insurance, other alternative investments, then there's not a lot left over. So I am in fear. I'm living like in straight concern of what if I'm in a a devastating car accident or there's a big health emergency or what have you. I have found by and large that over the last decade of me using Shred, the amount of freedom and flexibility and peace that I have has gone up exponentially because I'm not playing the game the way that the providers of these tools want me to play it. We're playing by our own rules and we're getting ahead far faster.
How do you achieve clarity, certainty, and predictability in a world, economy, and markets that are volatile and chaotic? How do you have confidence in an environment where change and disruption is constant? Setting up infinite banking is how you establish certainty in an uncertain world, predictability in an unpredictable world. With an infinite banking policy, you have your capital warehoused outside of the Wall Street casino where it is guaranteed never to go down in value and guaranteed to grow tax-free. You have guaranteed access to your capital, and you also will be able to access your capital tax-free to use to capitalize on opportunities as you come across them. Creating your own banking system with infinite banking can be your secret weapon to protect and grow wealth during turbulent times. You can watch a presentation and explore infinite banking options for you and your family at yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com.
There's certain rules that have been put out and people are like, well, is it written down somewhere? Just look at the marketing and the conversations and the narratives. And we humans think in narratives and the stories, you know, the American dream with the white picket fence and, oh, you got to get a starter home. And then you live in the starter home for 5 years and then you upgrade to a bigger home because the families grow. I mean, this is a narrative that has been sold. And if you look at the narrative and you sit on the other side of the table, because there's always different sides, you start to understand why that narrative is out there. Because like you said, when you set that mortgage up, you know, within 5 years, people either refinance or they sell their home, they're into another. So you never, ever, ever really make any significant movement. And you're always on the wrong side of a compound interest equation.
Totally.
So you can take a step out of these narratives, create new narratives for yourselves, and then play the game by the rules that you want to play by, right?
Yes. I think that's why shows like yours are so important too, because the marketing is ubiquitous. And the marketing that banks and other lending institutions are using, I mean, take Rocket Mortgage as an example. Push a button and get a mortgage. Couldn't be easier, right? We all know that's not true. You can't push a button and get a mortgage. It requires phone calls and documentation and underwriting and paying underwriting fees and closing costs and all of that stuff. It's not easy, but we're going to sell it to you like it's super easy. So we get your lead and then we're going to sell you a credit card. We're going to sell you this and that and the other. And if we buy into the marketing and we pay zero attention to shows like yours, then we will end up the way the majority of certainly Americans have, which is you're 60 or 65 and you're looking at your situation like, I sure hope I have enough to retire comfortably. And I think beginning to challenge the narrative and is really important. One of the questions that I like to ask people is not, wouldn't it be nice if I could pay my house off early? But what if you could pay your house off in the next 2 years? Or what if you could get your house payment down a third of what it is today and do that in 24 months? Because we can show you how that's done, but you do have to think a little bit differently to get there. And just to throw the question back to you, MC, for your audience, but if you had, I don't know what your particular mortgage situation is or housing or you know, rental properties or whatever, but if you could take all of the loans outstanding you had and pick them one by one and say, I would love for that one to be a third of what it is, would you be excited by that?
Oh, yes. And right now, the conversations that we are having too, we're in a market cycle. I always say that we're in a market cycle and you do different things throughout the market cycle. And I would argue that now is a very, very good time to reduce debt as much as possible.
Yeah.
because that, like I said, before, it can and will be used against you as a weapon at some stage.
Yep.
And anybody listening to this that's been through 2008, 2009, and 2010, they completely understand how and when and it could and will eventually. So if you're an investor, do you want to put yourself in a stronger position or a less favorable position, in a significant downturn with a lot of turbulence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To that end, one of the comments that comes to mind as you're describing it even is Warren Buffett used to say, when gold is falling from the skies, are you going to go out and collect it with a thimble or a wheelbarrow? And the whole idea behind a thimble is, I don't have a lot of money, so I'm going to try and get what I can get. But if you've got equity, you've got liquidity, you've got money in a policy, you've got options and choices, when gold is falling from the sky, right? And what he's referring to is when there is a market shift, and there will be, the people who have any kind of liquidity and equity on their side will go out and snatch that up.
Yep.
And better be the person that's prepared to do it than the person who is like, oh man, if only I have done this some time ago.
This is gold falling from the sky, this information, because the conversations that are happening outside in the world is all about, well, what do I invest in right now? Where do I put my money? Where's the next Nvidia or
Yeah.
Apple or
Yeah.
Doggy Coin or all this other stuff, the get rich quick kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It excites people, great cocktail party conversation, all
Totally.
that stuff. But what is not great cocktail party conversation, and the stuff that is actually, like, if you have to run the numbers, that the return that you're going to get and the infinite returns on your money by being efficient within your own personal business and investing, you cannot right now find anything that's going to, this is the best investment. This, and if you have a business, investing in your business and growing it, there's no
Yeah.
other investments that could even, come close, unless you bought Bitcoin at, less than $1, maybe
Yeah.
over the past decade, said and
Yeah.
just, of
Yeah.
course. I don't think there's any investment that could touch this cash flow optimization and efficiency right now.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with you. And your comment about Bitcoin is hilarious because whenever anyone talks about buying Bitcoin at $1 or less than $1, I was doing engagements at high schools and colleges in the early part of my career. And it was shortly after, maybe a year or two after Bitcoin had come out. And it was the whole story of like someone ordered a pizza with 20 Bitcoin or
Yep.
whatever the number was, right? And I was in front of this high school group and a kid raised his hand and he said, should I be investing in Bitcoin? And I'd done a little research and read it. And I said, hey, here's what you need to know. It's super volatile. It hasn't been proven yet. If you're willing to take the risk, then by all means, keep investing. I go, if you don't mind my asking, how many coins do you currently hold? And he said, I have about 35 right now. So you think about where this kid's at. If he did hold, right? He's a hodler. Hold on for dear life.
Yep.
I just have to do the math here really quick. If he only had 35 and today's price is about 66.5, so he'd have about 2.3 million bucks and he'd be probably in his early 30s, let's say late 20s, early 30s. It's a pretty savvy kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think like the big thing here, for folks, and I really want to like hammer this home because
Yeah.
we get emails. I mean, I'm sure you get too. What should I be doing right now? Where am I putting my money? What should I investing
Yep.
in? What are some of the best investments right now? I mean, this right now is the main thing. And this also, just want to preface this, and maybe you can comment on this. This is nothing to do with scarcity. That's the other
No.
thing, the scarcity and the abundance mindset. This
Yeah.
is about being efficient and be as abundant as you can. I look at all of the things in my spending plan. I'm very intentional, and most
Mm-hmm.
of them are investments. I
Yes.
look at them as investments
Yes.
because it either contributes, to the goals that I have for myself and my family. But you got to be more efficient, and that's going to drive the needle and move the needle like nothing else.
Yeah. And I want to touch on two things along those lines, MC. You mentioned this is not about scarcity. It really isn't. Some people will say, oh, I've got to change. I got to eat beans and rice. This is not a beans and rice diet thing at all. I want you to go have dinner with your family at a restaurant. I want you to take a vacation. We are going to create efficiency with your income so it doesn't just sit stagnant in an account. It's the velocity of money. It's constantly moving, right?
Yep.
Number two, this theory that, oh, it's all or nothing. It's an either or proposition. So if I'm going to do shred, I can't invest. It's not, it's both and. But my mentality has always been that if you do for 2 years what most people won't do, you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do. And so to provide an example of that, we have lots of shredders who will be in shred for 12 or 18 or 24 months. They will reduce the size of their mortgage, sometimes in half or more in that amount of time. And then one of our strategies is we tell them, okay, now request a recast of the mortgage from your lender. And if your payment was $2,500 before, it's now maybe sub 1,000 because you still have 28 years left or 26 years left on your mortgage, but the balance is so much smaller. And places like Wells Fargo will do that as many times as you like with one phone call. They will recast. So we have shredders who literally have decreased the amount of their mortgage payment to between $300 and $500 a month. And they're living in 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square foot homes. They're paying their taxes and insurance once a year, but they're paying it out of their shred account, creating that efficiency of money. And so on a month by month basis, they're freeing up so much discretionary income that what they're doing, and we espouse this, and I will shout this to the heavens, is you must build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. Because the lifestyle is what we work really hard to afford. But if you build a really big life, things are great. I mean, life is family time, travel, freedom, flexibility, options, discretionary income, cash flow, equity. That's building a bigger life. The lifestyle gets really stressful to keep up. The life is easy when you build a bigger life.
Who are the people that the shred method is an absolute no-brainer for, and who are some folks that it might not be something to jump in right away for?
Let me start with the latter first.
Okay.
If someone has more month at the end of their money, this is not for them. We got to get spending under control, and you got to increase your income. And we like to describe that as offense and defense. So you got to play really good offense, make more money, go ask for a raise, go find some side hustles, create some passive income streams, and you got to play really good defense. Let's minimize all the subscriptions, the deductibles, anything we can do to minimize what our monthly is. Once there is sufficient discretionary income, now it's time to look at shred. So the ideal shredder is typically it's going to be a 6-figure household. So that could be a dual income or it could be a single income. The other spouse is working, but you're probably making at least 6 figures, because at 6 figures, there should be a little bit more left over at the end of the month. That's not to say that if someone's making 50 grand and you're a single person, it doesn't work. It would. We just have to make sure you're disciplined and there's money left over.
Yep.
But generally speaking, they're 35 to 55. They probably have at least one child. They're concerned about how am I going to afford college? How am I going to pay for braces? How am I going to buy a car for my kid at some point? We have people who are concerned about how they're going to retire in comfort and dignity if they've not been aggressive enough in saving and investing. And the raw truth there, MC, is that if you are 55 or 60 and you're counting on your investments to grow fast enough to get to a point where you can have freedom and flexibility, you're probably aggressively investing and your risk profile's way off the charts. And or there's not enough time for you to create a doubling to get you to the point you need to be at. And so the next logical step is, well, then how do we minimize our expenses down to the ridiculous? And the way you do that is through shred. So we've often found there's a lot of catch-up folks who might be 50, 55, 60 that are like, I need something and I need to pivot and create a strategy or follow a strategy that will get me to where I need to be sooner. And that is the shred method.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think like you just mentioned, the folks that are trying to catch up in the next couple of years for retirement, I mean, Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. And of course, with the baby boomer generation going into retirement right now, or already in retirement, there's a massive retirement crisis on the horizon.
Yeah,
And I would even argue and say for folks that are depending on getting their full pensions, regardless of where you are at,
yeah,
all you have to do is look at the financials of the parties that are promising you those pensions.
no doubt.
Yeah,
No doubt. No doubt about that. I'm kind of blown away by the number of 66, 67, 68, 69-year-olds that are still working today. And the goal, I think, for many of them is they're going to squeeze every ounce they can out of their Social Security. We're living longer. So, think about how much longer you might have to live with no income. So better to be prepared on the front end than be worrying on the back end. And I mean, candidly, I love finding 30-year-olds, 25-year-olds even that have the wherewithal to buy their first home. When I show them Shred, I'm like, literally, it will be a work optional situation for you within 10 years if you follow this system. So I get young people, I love it, man. They're like my favorite people to work with. But I also appreciate working with folks who may be in the second half of life and are looking ahead going, I don't know, things look a little uncertain. We want to help them create certainty.
yeah. I feel like everything that we talked about today, like getting your spending in line, that having an intentional spending plan, and
Yep.
then plugging cash flow leaks, incorporating the shred method, and building up a warehouse of cash somewhere to deploy in other alternative investments. I think you're going to be in good shape if you do that, and you're not going to have to worry about Social Security, whom by their own records and their latest reports said they're out of money in 9 years,
Yeah.
coming from the
Yeah.
horse's mouth. And pensions already, I
Right.
mean, all these pensions got absolutely smacked by, with the bonds, with interest rates spikes, just like the banks. They were already in
Yes.
trouble before that. So
Yes.
again, clarity, certainty, security. If you're looking for that stuff, you're going to have to take control of the reins and not depend on all these other programs are in the process of basically collapsing, right?
Totally. Totally. No doubt. And as we look to the future, and inflation will be a real thing and it will continue. Um, I mean, no matter who is installed in a new administration, there will be money printed because that's something the US has always done. And so as more money is printed, things will get more expensive. There's just no question. Our dollar is worth less every time $1 trillion is printed. Our dollars become worth less. Not worthless, but worth less. So one of the things that I shake my head or scratch my head about today is that when people say it's just really hard to get by, it's really hard to make it in today's world. I think if you're just getting started, I agree. If you are a 30, 40, 50-year-old person, that is a behavior challenge because the behavior should be I figured out how to manage my expenses and or make more so that I always have money left over at the end of the month. That really should be the goal. And if we're doing that, then the question is, how can I make that extra money that's left over as efficient as humanly possible?
So, when we're talking on staying on the topic of financial literacy, what are some of I would say the biggest trends that you're seeing right now in this space, and what are some of the things that you're personally watching?
I'm excited about the fact that more and more states are requiring personal finance to be a graduation requirement of high school. And I know some of the players in that world that are producing the curriculum and the content for that group. And I believe that they're in good hands. So I'm excited about that. I think we are still woefully unprepared for what the future looks like, given the state of Social Security that you mentioned, MC.
Yep.
And that goes down even to companies not doing enough to get their employees investing in 401k plans and Roth IRAs and future investment vehicles. I'm really paying close attention because I'm in the space, as are you, about what does insurance play in terms of a part for future retirement planning. And there are insurance companies out there that have been around for 150 years that are offering products that I think could be the answer for a lot of people, particularly if you get in when you're really young or when your kids are really young. And so one of the things I'm also excited about is as we bring up this community of shredders that are hundreds strong and will soon be thousands strong, that we are trying to educate them. Here's how you bring your kids up in this world so that they understand the power of velocity banking and infinite banking, and that we're going to create our own financial ecosystem that is independent of what the lenders do, because we won't need them at some point. And when that happens, it's like we can write our own ticket. They were talking about generational wealth. And if we can teach enough people how to begin creating that when you're young, through discipline, through consistency, predictability, efficiency, I think the world will be a better place. And so big picture, that's what I'm excited about as I look to those trends.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about having a similar vision of a group of people that is just financially independent and they don't rely on all of this crazy stuff that's going on in banking,
Yeah,
and are beholden to that. So they kind of they they take the different road, right? The road
exactly.
less traveled. So Adam, one question I always ask people, because we talk a lot about business, we talk about investing, we talk about cash flow on the show,
Yeah,
but we also talk about living and leaving a legacy. So I always
yeah,
ask my first time guest, if you cannot pass on any money to future generations and you are only allowed to pass on 3 principles or values to them to
yeah.
build wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
Well, the very first one I mentioned, and it's been my mantra for the last decade and a half almost, which is build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. That's number one. Um, we're trying to impress people with the things we have, and they couldn't care less, right? It's nice to have a nice car. I mean, I don't take that away from anybody. If you want it, great. If you can afford it. But a big life means you love your family, you love your spouse, you get to travel with them. You have really close friends and a great community of people that even if all you're doing is sitting around a campfire in your backyard, that's big. That's a big life today. So that's principle number one. Principle number two is I have this on the wall in my office. It is that we are the architect of our own lives. And so everything in your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. And if you don't like it, then you just got to re-engineer the way it's functioning to get what you do like. So we are the architects and the engineers of our own life, and our lives are perfectly engineered for the results we're getting. That's number two. And number three, and I think this is interesting, particularly for parents, if you've got parents listening. So if you're listening and you have kids, pay close attention here. It's basically this, that I think in our society, we have conflated love and struggle. And I've seen parents say, I love my kids and therefore I don't want them to struggle. And in reality, as parents, one of the things we actually should do is encourage the struggle and then help support them through that struggle, coach them, guide them, but know that they can stand on their own 2 feet on the other side. And so, I've done a lot of work around teaching parents how to teach their kids how to thrive with money, and be able to stand on their own 2 feet financially when they're teenagers, because heaven forbid they're 18 to 25 and they're still relying on mom and dad to make their financial decisions. But there's a lot of those people out there. So teach your children well, let them struggle. They need to bruise their knees. And I heard this just this morning, just to add one more thing, MC. A good friend of mine in my workout group, he said, be the buffalo. On the plains, cows run away from the storm coming in, and they end up spending twice as much time in the storm. Buffaloes will turn headlong and run into the storm, and they spend half as much time in the storm. And so we got to teach our kids to be the buffalo, run at that challenge head on, and it will last half as long as what most people's challenges will.
Fantastic. I really appreciate all of those. This is incredible. Adam, where can people follow you? Where can they connect? Where can they get in touch? And where can they learn more? And if they wanted to join the Shred Method, join it.
Yeah, great question. So theshredmethod.com is our website. And MC, if anyone's intrigued enough to learn more and find out how the system works, we have a masterclass that's available on the site. We offer a 20-minute discovery call with one of our team, one of our coaches. So they'll run your numbers and tell you, does this make sense? And here's how much money you could save. Here's how fast you could be out of debt. And if you want to follow me, Adam Carroll, 2Rs2Ls.info is my website. And everything's out there from, I've done a couple of TEDx talks. So one of my TED Talks is out there. There's a documentary on student loan debt I did in 2017. Obviously, I'm still out there speaking and training. So if you're interested in hiring me for that, there's a form you can fill out. But I would say adamcarroll.info or theshredmethod.com are the two sites.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, this has been a blast. It's been great to connect. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights and your knowledge and providing so much value for all of my listeners and viewers.
I appreciate you, MC. Keep doing what you're doing, man. This is so important.
Absolutely. And thank you to all of our listeners and our viewers for, again, spending the most valuable resource, your time, with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. Podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up to the Wealth Dojo newsletter. It goes out every single week. You can subscribe to the Wealth Dojo newsletter where we cover alternative wealth strategies and alternative asset investments at cashflowninja.com/subscribe. Until next time, live infinitely.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.